Okay. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for our lunchtime chats with Tlingit Haida. As many of you know me, my Tlingit name is Chachkia Ish. My English name is Richard Peterson, and I'm the president of Tlingit Haida. I'm excited today to bring you this lunchtime chat, which focuses on the CBJ elections, and excited to have our guests here. Maria Gladaszewski, Lacey Durr, Derek Ginich.
Ginich, close.
Sorry about that. He even helped me with it. Robert Shoemake and Christine Wall. Boy, I didn't miss anybody. And again, just excited to have you all here. And again, thank you for running for public office. I think a lot of times we don't take the time to thank you and what a sacrifice it is. And I'm sure you're all learning. I think besides Maria, this is all, I believe, your first time running. It's a lot of work. It takes a real commitment, and I appreciate you for taking the time and joining us so that can reach out to our constituents, our tribal citizens here in Juneau, who make up over 7,000 of the citizens here in Juneau, or Tlingit Haida citizens. So we're excited to have candidates running for CBJ, area-wide, and District 2 Assembly seats. So why don't we go ahead and have you introduce yourselves, and I'll start with the area-wide candidate, Maria.
Thank you. I'm Maria Gladaszewski, and I'm running for the area-wide seat. Thanks for hosting this forum, for inviting us into your homes on Zoom and Facebook, and for voting in local elections. It's really important. I grew up in Chicago. I am the grandchild of Marian and Jenny Gładaszewski and Joseph and Maria Baharowicz, all four immigrants from Poland who worked in the Chicago stockyards and built a life in America. I first stepped on the lands of the Aucantacuquan 40 years ago when I came up here for a summer job. I fell in love with the country, and after I finished school, I moved back here permanently. I've served the community in a number of ways, been on several boards. I was on the Planning Commission for about 11 years. Been on some committees, local committees about homelessness, and 2 mining different committees, and solid waste and tourism. And eventually I ran for the assembly, where I've been for 6 years. I've served 2 terms. This would be my third term if you vote for me again. I've been honored to work, to serve on the assembly. And I always say that I work for everyone in Juneau, not just for the people that agree with me or the people that voted for me. If we hear and respect everyone, we get a better community, we get better decisions. So it's been my whole ground, how I do my work. I'm running because I care about the future of Juneau, and I think I have some experience that will help us through these next few years. It's been very difficult in the last 6 months, I'm not gonna lie. The decisions have been hard, the information has been changing, and I think some experience will be helpful as we move forward. I know I've made a difference in how we've responded to the pandemic, and I look forward to working more for the community. But I think the assembly stepped up, and the city staff stepped up, and the community has stepped up to help each other as we navigate these times that are a lot of uncertainty. But I'm proud of how we've worked together, and I look forward to working more in the next few years. Thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the District 2 Assembly candidates, I'll start with Lacey.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. My name is Lacey Durr. I'm running for Assembly District 2. I was born and raised here in Juneau, and I'm currently raising 3rd generation Juneauites. Juneau is not just a place for me. This is home. This is where I was born. This is where I'm raising my family. And this is where I have some of my most cherished loved ones that I've laid to rest. I'm not going anywhere. And it is in these trying times that we really find our own drive and our own passion to serve others. I have been very fortunate, and I have an incredible husband, and I have an incredible support system around me. And I want to be able to give the knowledge and the love and the courage that I have back to my community. I'm really looking to be part of those changes that we have. We're in a unique opportunity being here in Juneau to where, yes, we are facing some of the hardest times that we ever have. Our budget is going to be extraordinarily painful to look at, but we have these opportunities in front of us, and with these CARES funds that are already being put to work to start realizing goals that the Assembly has been working on for quite a while. And, you know, I think the Assembly has done incredible work. They have been doing what needs to be done to keep Juneau safe. And, you know, I would love to be part of that conversation moving forward. And I really hope to be part of that positive change to see Juneau come to what we really hope it to be.
Great, thank you, Lacey. Derek?
Thank you. So I just want to thank Tlingit Haida for hosting this lovely event today. I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak with everyone watching today on this beautiful misty day here in Tlingit. I am a second generation born and raised Juneauite, having spent almost all my life living here. I was born here in 1997. My grandparents immigrated to the US from Croatia in the 1950s after World War II. And they first came to town here in Juneau in 1970. My grandfather was the project engineer of the Sonetisham Power Station, and ever since, my family has been based here, with many members serving as teachers in the local school district. My dad teaches at JDHS, as does my aunt, and my grandmother did as well. I graduated from the same high school, JDHS, in 2016, having served as student body president. I then went on to study international relations and political science at Elon University, and I just completed Bachelor of Arts in both in May. And I've now returned to Juneau immediately after. I believe that I'm a product of this community. I'm educated by our schools, supported by my friendly neighbors, and it really does take a village, and I'm inclined to give back to the one that supported me. We as a community are facing unprecedented circumstances, and a lot of these effects of the circumstances we currently face disproportionately affect minorities, and I think that's a big issue we need to focus on, and how we can defray those impacts for our tribal citizens here in town and in Alaska more broadly. And as a representative of District 2, I will listen closely to the concerns of my constituents, and as a representative of younger generations, I will strive to bring fresh and innovative ideas to the table as we chart a path forward for our town.
Great, thank you, Derek. Christine.
Thank you, Buenos Chish and Hawa, for the invitation to be here today. My name is Christine Wall. I am the daughter of Peggy McKinnon and Stephen Wall. My work on Ancestry.com has showed me that my ancestors are from Italy, Germany, England, Ireland, and Scotland. I moved to Alaska 11 years ago to get my master's degree in fisheries and decided to stay. Now I own a home in Occoquan territory on the Mendenhall Peninsula with my husband, Peter. In my day job, I work for the Nature Conservancy, and in that work, I work directly with Southeast Alaska communities, in particular, Klawock, Heidelberg, Hoona, and Cake, and a few others on sustainable development and community-led conservation. And to be honest, working with Alaska Native communities, tribes, and Native corporations has been the highlight of my career, mainly because I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of self-learning about how to take a more holistic approach to the connection between people and the land. I've learned how to listen better to elders and to youth, and I've learned how to center relationship in all the work that I do. And I hope that I've taken those lessons in service to my own community as well. I sit on the Juneau Commission on Sustainability, and I chair the Blueprint Downtown Area Planning Committee. I'm running for assembly because I think this is a really important moment in time, not only for us to be focused on protecting our health and safety, but also I think we have an opportunity to rethink how to build this place in a way that it is healthier, more resilient, and more just. I think I have the experience to back that up. Through my work with the city, I understand its issues, and then through my day job, I have experience dealing with complex issues, building collaborative partnerships, and leading and managing teams and budgets. I am excited for the opportunity to serve my community in a greater capacity, and I'm excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about the issues that you all care about. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Robert?
Hello, I'm Robert Shoemake, and I'm running to represent you on the CBJ City Assembly in District 2. I own budget of plans to prepare. I served in the U.S. Navy and worked on submarines and later in the Naval Shipyard. After that, I worked all over the country as the captain on passenger ferries and car ferries for both tourism and regular commuter transportation, including one that helped during Hurricane Sandy in New York City. After riding out the storm on the vessel, it turned out we were the only vessel still operating. So we helped first responders get to where they needed to go. Now I fix appliances here in Juneau, and I do what is necessary for my family and children to have the best possible future. I listen to people and try to help them find the best solution to their problem, whether it helps our bottom line or not. Sometimes another company or a new appliance is the best choice for them and their quality of life. That's who I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We'll go ahead and move right into questions. And I'll just go down my list and start in the opposite order for you all to answer. So starting, Robert, I'll give you the first opportunity to answer. Parents are finding juggling work and their children's virtual homeschool challenging. Some students and parents lack the support, internet access necessary for remote learning. What do you propose to do to help families still struggling, and how do you plan to address schooling issues?
We are really limited to what we can do about schooling issues due to the COVID. We must really work as a community to help our children through these challenges. The CARES Act funding needs to be used for students' needs, like expanding internet availability for students whose families can't afford it, and expanding the Rally program to help work with parents who need it. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine?
Thanks. I don't have children in school, but some of the people I supervise do, and it's been amazing to watch them try to balance everything that's going on. I don't know how they're doing it, to be honest. I want to thank Tlingit Haida in particular, because I know that you all have been doing a lot to provide more access and more resources to students, better technology during this time. And I think that's really important that the city is partnering with Tlingit Haida on that. I think our first priority needs to make sure our school district is well resourced during this time. We still have CARES funding to spend, and so we need to be responsive to the school district's requests with that funding. We don't want the disparities that already exist in access to resources, particularly for Alaska Native students, to increase during this time. And I think even with remote learning, students are going to have some catching up to do after this. And so I'm hoping that we can really support immersive programming when we come out on the other side of this, to make sure that we're covering early education all the way through high school with supportive learning environments.
Thanks. Derek?
So I think that this is a really important issue to address. I know towards the end of the summer, I was reading some articles that were saying Alaska Native children are least likely to have access to a high-speed internet connection, and in an age of sometimes indefinite online learning, that is a really important thing that we need to focus on. As Christine mentioned, the CARES Act funding, we do need to follow the school district's requests in appropriating those funds. I think that we also need to focus on supporting parents and families directly. I think it's important to focus on childcare as well. A recent survey from the Economic Stabilization Task Force suggests that around 1 in every 6 Juneau School District students will require childcare in order for their parents to keep working. So that's a really important part of this too. And I think that we can look around the nation to see what kind of special solutions have been come up with. I know that some districts were even using Wi-Fi modems placed in unused school buses to deliver Wi-Fi to underserved areas. So I think that we can draw some inspiration from wider resources like that. But we do need to address the problem, and this lack of high-speed internet connection disproportionately affects Native youth. So we need to address that issue as soon as possible.
Great. Lacey?
Thank you. That was such an excellent question. As a mother, this is something that I'm struggling with as well. As we've known, the entire world is depending on the internet right now. And just because you have internet does not mean that your connection is stable. And I know that the school district was going above and beyond to get devices out to students. And if it were not for that partnership with Tlingit and Haida, the resources you've provided and the work and support that you have done in partnership with the city, it's absolutely invaluable that these students are able to get the resources they can. But that's not going to say that there are kids falling through the cracks. My son is a kindergartner. We chose to homeschool, but I went through Homebridge because I wanted to make sure his funds stayed within the school district. But he is also on an IEP for his speech. I only just recently got in contact with his speech therapist, and we're now well into school, and his first services aren't even set up until next week. So we're facing all of these struggles, and we're learning as we go. One thing that the Assembly has done was the appropriation of CARES funds to Rally. There's a program that you can apply and have assistance to Rally. They're looking at pods and the support of helping your children and partnershiping them in schools with internet and help with that education. There are steps being made, and we need to continue to foster those and that conversation.
Great, thanks, Lacey. Maria.
Thank you. My hat's off to all teachers and parents who are struggling with all these decisions. I have people that I work with that have children, and that, we're on work Zoom calls, and their kids are, right in the same room. It's really difficult, and it's not going to end anytime soon. We're, of course, the Assembly, and we provide the funding to the school board. The elected school board is the one that makes, the very day-to-day decisions about what happens at the school. And they have been really working incredible over the summer and now. And they've been helped out by some CARES Act funding that we appropriated to them recently. And of course, Tlingit and Haida contributed too, which is really, we're really grateful for that. And I know they've given out something like 2,000 Chromebooks to students. There are about only 4,100 kids in school right now, and they've given out 2,000 Chromebooks already. And they're buying some iPads for kindergarten and first graders. Those aren't here yet because we just appropriated that money, and I think they're still trying to buy those. And I do know that there's something on the order of 140 or 150 kids who are struggling with internet still at access. And they have an individual person that is trying to work out the needs for each of those kids, and they're all different. Some of them are being bused with school buses to schools where they can use the internet there, but of course that's not suitable for younger kids. They're not focused enough to do it all by themselves all day long. So they're working on individual responses for each kid, and that's really impressive, and we need to continue that. And I understand the school board is going to be asking for some more CARES Act funds. I would wholly support that. Their parents are really struggling as our teachers to get lessons and to kids. So they're also working with GCI to pay for internet at a reduced rate for kids to access the internet to the school. So they're working through that as well. And all of those the individual responses for individual kids are going to be different, and they're really doing an amazing job. And the school lunches, breakfasts and lunches that they're working out is also an amazing thing. Any child from first kindergarten through high school, actually anybody under 18 can get a free lunch, breakfast and lunch. Recently they gave out about 5,500 breakfasts and 5,500 lunches. So it's like 11,000 meals for kids in the Juneau district. It's about 20% of the kids that are enrolled. So it's amazing they've been able to pull that off. So support all of that and more funding for all of that when they need it.
Great. Well, we know COVID-19 has definitely impacted our community, our economy, and social welfare of our citizens have been strained. What are some of the solutions you see to these challenges facing CBJ this year? And I'll turn to Derek.
Sure. So that's a really, really important question. Obviously, COVID-19 has really presented us with some challenges that we did not expect to be facing. I think that investment in the local economy and responsible spending, a pairing of those two things, is essential to moving forward. As far as the investment goes, I support the bond package that's going to be on the ballot this fall. I think that lessons that we learned following the Great Depression show us that infrastructure investment is a proven method to alleviating some of the impacts of economic instability. It gets people working, it gets money flowing into the economy. And to that end, I think that it's an important measure. It also has important measures in there for business support and some other important things in there. So I definitely support that as far as investment goes. And then I think it's also important to really prioritize and allow for a lot of public comment, a lot of weighing in as to how we're going to balance the budget going forward. It's going to be difficult to invest while balancing the budget. I understand that, but I think that when history tells us that it is an effective and it's an effective strategy towards moving forward. So I think a combination of infrastructure spending as well as budget balancing is the key.
Thank you. Lacey?
Thank you for that. You know, we have already had some of our budget reviews done, and we already had kind of a very difficult hand dealt to us with the extreme budget cuts that we got at the state level. And so it's going to be quite the process moving forward, and it's going to take conversations. But we cannot move forward and without taking care of our most vulnerable. We cannot let the most vulnerable slip through the cracks. We need to continue to foster the movement that we have made on the Glory Hall. That is going to be a huge movement forward from getting our unsheltered into sheltered. And what we want to do is look at long-term sustainable housing. That is across our community. And how we're going to get to that is by continuing to focus local. We're going to have to do our local infrastructure. With the bond packages moving forward, we're looking at repairs to our schools, keeping jobs local, keeping revenues local. It's going to take us all moving together and looking for the best choices with the funds that we do have available. But we are in a very unique position to be able to move Juneau forward into a brighter future and start pushing forward the projects that we've been working on and actually really see them come into fruition.
Great, thank you. Maria?
Thanks. I guess I would say we must remember all members of our community. COVID has affected everyone, there's no question. But what has been crystal clear is that we are not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but some people have big boats and some people have tiny skiffs and some people have a life preserver and some people are holding on to a 2x4. I mean, that has, if we didn't know about the inequities in our system before, it's really clear now that they exist. And it's often hard to hear the voices of those folks most in need. Many people contact the Assembly and advocate for their interests. But we also know there's many people that never do. Because of where I came from a working class background in the South Side of Chicago, 0 times did I know anybody who contacted City Hall or any level of government. 0 times. Nobody even thought that those people listened. So that's still true here. So I'm always thinking about those people that don't call, the people that aren't emailing. In the global sense, we must get our economy back working. So we must keep the virus levels low enough that we can keep the businesses open and that we can get kids back to school. That's where they learn best. That's where they should be. So it's all these things are interconnected. We also have some CARES Act funding left to spend before the end of the year. And so if anyone on this who's listening now has any ideas about how to distribute those remaining dollars, please contact me immediately to give me that idea. We have to do it by next week to sort of get it all in motion, get those paperwork in motion so that the money can get out to the people who need it if they can be spent before the end of December. We were sort of saving some because we had imagined that the deadline for spending would be extended, but because of all the political chaos in Washington, that doesn't look like that's going to happen. And we don't want to leave any of those dollars on the table. I mean, I know there's going to be needs in March and April, but those dollars need to be spent. The safe bet is we need to spend them before December. So if anyone has any ideas, please call me, email me, whatever. One of the ideas that I'm excited about talking about future spending for this money is a fill the fuel tank or a pay your electric bill. The idea is that anybody who can show they've been just certify that you've been affected by COVID-19 and that you need this money, and we would pay $500 of your either electric bill or to fill your fuel tank. That we're just talking about that. None of the details are worked out, but that's one idea to get some money in the pockets of folks before the end of the year. So if you like that idea or you have a better idea, please let me know. Thanks.
Thank you. Robert?
Our entire world has been turned upside down. Small businesses are suffering, especially in the food service industry. Even government offices are struggling to complete their missions in this environment. Many people still working from home. They're very different. Things are very different for everyone. As a community, we need to watch out for each other, help when we can. If you need help, reach out. And if you can help, answer the call. The young, the old, and the disadvantaged are taking the brunt of it. Our elders and our children aren't meant to be isolated. We all need to do our part to watch out for those slipping through the cracks. Many of our citizens experiencing homelessness were moved onto the streets due to COVID restrictions. The Glory Hall shelter was just closed due to exposure. While opening the Jack as a warming shelter is helping, it's not taking care of our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. And Christine?
I like all of the ideas that were suggested by my fellow candidates. I think the only thing that I'd add is just we need to remember that COVID-19's not over and that we're not going to be able to force people back into restaurants or make them put their kids back in school. We're not going to convince tourists to come back here. People are going to need to feel safe to be able to do those things. And so health and safety needs to be our first priority so we can get kids back to school and get people back to work. And so for that to happen, we need to keep focusing on listening to public health expertise, social distancing, masking. I think bringing rapid testing here is going to be really important. And I think we even need to be thinking about how we're going to administer a vaccine when it arrives. Thanks.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on the CBJ budget and how might we, the citizens, be directly impacted? And I'll go ahead and start with Christine.
Thanks. I think this is really difficult to predict right now. The state budget decisions in particular have a pretty big impact on CBJ budget and our overall community well-being. And so I think we need to be advocating for a state budget that values our prosperity. I think we need to be marketing our city as a safe city so that we do have some tourism revenue coming into the city next year. And I think ultimately we might need to, dip into our rainy day funds to address, the budget shortfalls, because this is about as rainy as it gets, both literally and figuratively, I think. And so this is probably the time to dig into those.
Maria?
Oh, thank you. Well, all signs indicate that it's going to be very tough for the nation and including, obviously for Juneau. And the most important job of an assembly member is to balance public spending and with available revenue. How much can we afford and how much have we taken in? And what we take in is from the pockets of people. It's either property taxes or sales taxes. And given that our sales taxes, we've missed a whole sector, all the tourists didn't come, we really are going to face some tough challenges. Because other past assemblies and past managers and past city staff have been fairly frugal. I mean, I know a lot of people don't believe that, but we had almost over $30 million in our rainy day accounts, two separate ones, but we've been able to weather a lot of these storms, including when the state didn't pay what they promised for school debt reimbursement. So we used some, so to balance the budget this year, we're on a 2-year cycle. We were short $34 million. And we started, fortunately, we had CARES Act money and used some of that. We cut back on capital spending. We trimmed some off of the city budget. And we use some of our rainy day fund, and that's what it is for. Obviously, it is certainly raining. So we still have a pretty decent amount in there, and this is as raining as it gets, as Christine just said. So we could use some of that. But, as the pandemic lingers on, and if we don't get as many tourists as we had hoped, things could be even grimmer next year. What I would hope is that we would be able to engage more of the community in those conversations, because what traditionally happens is something falls to the bottom, and then those things on the bottom are somebody's special projects, and they come and advocate for those. The more people we could get to be engaged in the discussions about, what are the priorities, what do we have to stop doing? We've been trimming the budget for years now, and it's really to the point where there's no more trimming. We'll have to stop doing something. And we have 11 schools and 3 libraries and 2 pools. And, can a community of 33,000 afford that? And those are decisions we might have to start making. Right now, again, we're okay. We got some CARES Act money, but we're heading into really uncertain times.
Thank you, Maria. Robert?
There are some things the city must provide: fire, police, EMS, roads, water and sewer, and schools. Our city owns a hospital and our airport. Everything else needs to be on the table. We may have to decide which things we can no longer afford to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Lacey?
There's no real way to say it other than it's going to be a really painstaking process, but it's going to take a renewed vision from all of us. And it's not saying that we can't do it. We're going to have to balance those needs versus wants, and those needs are going to have to be prioritized. And, I think that we've done an incredible job so far dispersing those CARES Act funds to start alleviating, it was really eloquently said at one of the assembly meetings, to alleviate some of the pain. And we're working as diligently, I say we as in the city, but the assembly is working as diligently as possible in trying to find these ways around. But like Maria was saying, it is the ideas of the public that is going to move us through on these things. And, as we remain focused on this, we can start putting money back into our community and keeping those revenues local. It's going to keep health and safety. We are going to have to keep our numbers down in order to be able to do that tourism cares campaign and really honestly invite people back and let them know that they really are safe and be sincere about that. But I hope to be part of that conversation, as it is something that we can do, but we have to be looking forward to the future, and it is going to take all of us.
Thank you. Eric?
So I definitely think that Juneau is hurting right now. We're really struggling. We have the real unique designation is kind of a semi-isolated community, and that works really well for us. But it's also hard, to be in that situation as we weather such a serious crisis. So I think as we move through the next year, we have to do everything with the long-term stability and recovery of Juneau in full view. And that may mean saving some of those rainy day funds to get us through the late spring and the summer. That may mean making some facilities cuts. That may mean some difficult decisions. But, we have to plan for the long term. And if we end up in a situation where it's over earlier than we expect, then that's just great. But, we have to kind of plan for the worst, I think. And I think especially, I forgot who brought this up, but as we move towards next summer, we definitely do want to get some tourism revenue back in town. But in order for that to happen, both Juneauites have to feel safe hosting people, and visitors have to feel safe coming here. So I really appreciate the efforts of organizations like Travel Juneau to work with businesses to certify themselves for COVID safety, to market Juneau as an independent destination rather than a mass transit destination, not necessarily in competition, but as a separate marketing effort, and to market our city as a safe outdoor geared place for people to visit. But none of that can happen unless we as Juneauites feel safe doing that and people feel safe visiting. So we have got to plan for the long term, and we've got to do everything we can to make our community safe.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go off script here a little bit and just go ahead and start taking some viewer questions. From Sandy Edwardson, we have, what can the Assembly do to encourage the legislature to fund the school bond debt? And I will start with Christine.
I think we need to make it more clear that the state budget does have big impacts on the city, and I think our city manager Rory Watt has done a good job. That when we find out what's happening with the state budget, that he calls out what exactly that means for us and our citizens. And so I think that will help kind of mobilize the people in this community to speak with their representatives and make sure this is a high priority for them.
Great. Lacey?
Thank you. I've written a lot of letters lately, and, I can't be the only one, but I know I'm not the only one. It is going to take the voice of all of us. We cannot remain silent. The community cannot remain silent, because this is something that affects us all. It's going to take being that front and center at the Capitol and making our voices heard. It's not something that we can choose to just sit back and hope that they come through. We have to voice and be the advocate for our city. And sometimes you have to be the annoying, that annoying voice that seems to get the attention. And sometimes you got to be that squeaky wheel. And, it's something that we're going to have to do. And I really think that we can do it. We have some great people on the Assembly with the strength and unity to do that. So I really hope to be part of that.
Great, thank you. Robert?
Well, we do have an election coming up here shortly. It might be a good idea to get out and talk to the candidates and tell them how we feel about the bond debt and how that would really help out our community. They live in the community. Their kids will go to school at our schools that the debt represents. And so I think encouraging each other to get out and talk to the representatives, call them up, email them, and let them know that we need some help with this issue. And if they want our votes, then that's going to be one of the things that we expect them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Derek?
Thank you. So Juneau is kind of also in a unique situation here, because we are a capital that sometimes doesn't get the attention that we need from other areas of the state. And we definitely need to lobby the legislature in order to fund the school bond debt here. But I think this is also part of an ongoing conversation of other areas of Alaska wanting to slowly move things away from Juneau. And I think it's absolutely essential that Juneauites rally around this issue and really, really advocate for our town. We also, frankly, need an administration in power that understands Juneau, understands Southeast, and supports Juneau as our capital city. And so not only do we need to lobby the legislature, but we also need to advocate for an executive administration, which puts the needs of Juneau as the capital city at an important ranking spot on the state budget. So I think we really need to make our voices heard. It happened in the 1990s, and it may happen again at some point, but we need to rally as a community and really fight for our spot as Alaska's capital city, a city deserving of funding, and a city deserving of investment and attention.
Great, thank you. Maria?
Thanks. We have to continue to work with our fellow municipalities around the state through the Alaska Municipal League and others to advocate for the state to live up to its end of the bargain. The Assembly and every member of the active citizenry who's has been working on this for years. Even when Bill Walker was the governor, who came from a municipal background, he was from Valdez, he was a municipal official, even he vetoed school debt reimbursement. He felt really bad about it. He apologized to us individually at the Alaska Municipal League, but he still vetoed it. He still vetoed half of that. The state is in a really tough spot, and they're looking for ways to dump it, their obligations elsewhere. And if they don't have to pay, they're in a tough spot too. So I absolutely agree with everybody who said we need to continue to lobby. We need to continue to do all we can, but we need to work with other communities The Mat-Su has taken on a lot of school debt because they're a growing community. So they actually are affected even more than Juneau because they've built even more new schools and renovated more schools. And they have a lot of political power in the Mat-Su. They have a lot of representatives, and still school debt got vetoed. So it's a tough situation. I will continue to do, the Assembly should continue to do all it can. Municipal League will continue to do all it can. And I don't know what else we could do, but continue to point out to them that they promised, and now they're reneging on the promise.
Thank you. So on this ballot, we have Proposition 2, which requests a tax increase. What is your response to those that question the timing of a tax increase given the impacts of COVID-19 and our changing economy? And I'll turn to Lacey.
Thank you. Proposition 2, I'm not a fan of bundling projects. I really think that they need to be looked at individually. But for the position that we're in and the timing that we're in, I think the Assembly did the best job that they could do with the information that they had at hand. And they were able to appropriate funds in a way that can be used. It is a way to look forward to the future and ensure that we're able to look local and start returning the money that we're asking back into our community, returning revenue. We're looking at that local infrastructure. Those are the most important things that we can be doing right now to keep our funds local. And as we do that and support our own city and also our own health and safety, we can start looking out towards our tourism again and marketing ourselves as a safe destination. And that will in turn bring in more funds. And I'm really grateful that this went out to the voters. I think it's important that community be able to vote on the situation, but I do think for the situation we're in, it was the best decision for our time.
Great, thank you, Lacey. Robert.
I think this may be a bad time to see a tax increase. While we have the debt capacity, it's like having room on your credit card. You're better off if you don't use it. That being said, for infrastructure issues that cannot wait, the interest rates are really low, and fixing things we already own helps provide jobs that our economy desperately needs.
Thank you. Maria?
Thank you. I'll just say a couple things. One, I think the projects are needed in this community. So that's the first thing. It doesn't meet the first threshold. They're needed. We need to fix a whole lot of things. Two, voters get to decide. So that's the whole point. But I guess your real question is about timing. Should we do this now? And I'd say two things about that. One that was already mentioned, we do have the debt capacity. When you get a mortgage and you are paying your mortgage, until that gets down, and you probably can't buy a car and a boat and fix another thing. So you manage your debt as a household, and once you pay off your car loan, maybe you can get a boat loan, whatever. So the city has capacity. We've paid off a bunch of loans already, and when you do the math, the city can take on this debt. It will be up to the voters. But what's the other point I'd like to make is that during the last economic downturn, we confirmed that public spending can play a key role in economic recovery. Worrying about deficits and debt during this time is prudent, but it is overridden by our economy is constrained now by demand. Everybody basically stopped spending, and one person's spending is another person's job. So money isn't circulating, and so public spending can really help get that going. You can't just spend money willy-nilly, but as I said about the debt capacity, we do have that. So it seems to me to be a reasonable amount. It's not a giant amount, and it's for projects that we need, and it will help our neighbors work. They are jobs that could be done by locals. They're not big, piling of some special thing that someone from out of town could come do. They are fixing roofs. They are putting in a new heating system. They're all things that Juneauites can do. So we can get a bunch of people working and keep them working as we try to recover economically. So that's what I'd say about the timing. Thanks.
Thanks, Maria. Derek?
Thank you. So I do support the bond package, and I mentioned this in an earlier answer. I know that it might come at a difficult time, but I also mentioned earlier that moving through economic recession, economic downturn, economic depression, infrastructure spending is a proven method towards alleviating some of the fiscal instability that results thereof. So I think that it's an important time to make this infrastructure in Juneau, this investment in Juneau's infrastructure. Other candidates have mentioned both the interest rate and also the debt capacity is favorable for this. It allows for it. A lot of people have been mentioning a certain vagueness or gray areas in the plan, but I think that it's important for it to be somewhat flexible, especially given the fact that when this proposition was written, we were still very uncertain as to whether or not the CARES Act funding deadline would be increased. So overall, I think it's important. A lot of it has to do with key repairs. I would say briefly that I think it's unfortunate that the CBJ and its constituent departments are so often behind on maintenance, but infrastructure investment is infrastructure investment, and jobs are jobs. So I think it's important for the community to support this, but ultimately the community will decide. And if the community doesn't find that the timing is possible for them to take on, it is their right as American citizens, as Juneauites, to turn it down. I plan to vote for it, though. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Christine.
I'll just reiterate what the other candidates said. We really need this proposition because local infrastructure means local jobs right now, and that's gonna help us weather this pandemic. The only thing I'd add is that I think we need to be thinking about how this actually saves us money in the long term. The longer we wait on doing school maintenance or road maintenance, the more expensive it's gonna get. And I sit on the Juneau Commission on Sustainability, so we got a preview of some of the energy efficiency upgrades, and those two will save our city money in the long run.
Great. So I'm wondering what your thoughts on the recent CBJ Systemic Racism Review Committee. And I'll start with Derek.
Thank you. So I think that this is a very important development for our community. My dad is a history teacher, and I think that it's important to reflect on our community's history. And there are some really troubling things to find in there. So I think that it's an important step that this community has taken to signal that this is something we want to work on, and this is not something we want to tolerate anymore. And a lot of issues regarding systemic racism, sometimes they persist because they fail to be pointed out. And so I think that this Systemic Racism Review Committee, which is going to be reviewing legislation and is tasked with making recommendations to the Assembly, I think that it's important to take that first step and show that we are examining our legislation to see if it's aiding and abetting the continued pervasiveness of systemic racism. And then I think part two of that is that it's really on the Assembly to listen to those recommendations, take them seriously, and if changes must be made, to really make those changes. So I look forward to seeing how it's implemented and how it really augments and improves our dialogue on systemic racism in Juneau, both past, present, and also as we move into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert?
Racism is real. It is wrong. It is hard to believe we are still talking about this in 2020. That being said, if the committee finds things that need to be changed, then we need to change those things. If we can do something better than we already are, then I'm ready for that conversation and to make those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Lacey?
You know, I'm really grateful that the Systemic Racism Review Committee has been established, and I'm really grateful that the Assembly appropriated CARES funds to that to make it a really solid start to looking at Juneau's past, to ensure that we're moving into our future, really looking at all areas. It's unintended actions that, as Derek was saying, they go overlooked for so long because they were unintended, and it was that lack of attention being brought to them. You know, this is a very powerful time in our history. There's a lot of unrest, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain. And if there's anything that we can do, it is beginning to have those conversations. And it is important that we have those conversations. And by establishing this committee that shows that Juneau is committed to bringing this issue forward and start treating all of our citizens with care, dignity, and respect. And that is all anyone is asking as a human.
Thank you. Maria?
Thank you. Well, as everybody knows, we've had a much needed national reckoning on these issues in the last months. So I wholeheartedly support the necessary conversations that our community, like every community in the nation, has to have. And we struggled, or I struggled with this somewhat. We were all looking for, I certainly was looking for a practical way to move forward, not just to make some resolution that said we don't like racism, right? I want to actually do something, make a measurable difference. And I think there's an opportunity here to do that. More people support the Black Lives Matter movement today than did a year ago. It's pretty significant, you know, so people like me and others who have lived our lives as white people are forced to acknowledge that there is such a thing as white privilege. And I'm a woman, so I know full well about male privilege, but I'm a white woman, so that's my experience. So we need to talk about these issues, acknowledge the privilege, and we're to the point where not everybody even believes this is real. So there's a struggle to be had, and I will work as hard as I can to make sure this committee is successful and is set up in a manner that increases the chances that it is successful. And one thing that's sort of a side benefit of this is inviting people to participate that don't feel invited to the party. They just don't. I know that when I was minding my own business 15 years ago or whatever it was, when someone came to me and said, you should apply for the Planning Commission. And I thought, I don't even know what that is, you know, but somebody actually said to me and made me think about it. And I just think that a lot of people don't feel invited to the party. So if people can be on this committee, we can get good people to the table, maybe they'll start being involved in more helping tackle city issues, and we'll get more involvement from voices we don't normally hear from. So I look forward to the work, and it's going to be a lot of work, and I'm glad that Rob Edwardson pushed us and made this happen, and actually the entire community did it, because it's a conversation that we all really need to have. So and I felt it was really important to appropriate some money to it. I'll just correct Lacey just a little bit. It wasn't CARES Act money, it was just CBJ money. So it's there for, doesn't have to be spent by December. So I felt it was really important that it's, you know, a budget is a reflection of your values, and if you want to do this right, you need to spend some money. So we found some, and I support that.
Christine.
Thanks. I think it's really important for a few reasons. The news about Breonna Taylor yesterday was, I think, particularly devastating. But I think some people in this community think that if they aren't seeing atrocities or injustices that blatant, that racism doesn't exist here. And I think, you know, and we know it does. I think as a white person, I might not see that all the time. And so I think the review committee helps, because it brings in experts to point out the things that people like me might not always notice, places where our policies are actually leading to more disparities in the community, in ways that we can actually shape policies to be anti-racist. I also think they'll help bring more dialogue into the community, which is always needed. Thanks.
Thank you. You know, I'm going to use the privilege of being the moderator here. I've been involved with every level of local politics since I was 19, as a mayor at 19, and serving on the school board and tribal councils. And I really work hard to build relationships and bridges and point out that not everything's racist. Sometimes it's just what people don't know. But I'm going to point out a couple interactions I've had in my 6 years in Juneau with CBJ. One former CBJ member told me at a meeting, well, you know, Richard, Juneau wasn't even a Native community. And my response is, well, your building's on top of the old village site, and you have pictures of that in your hallway. So take a look. The other was I was asked to be on the homeless task force because, well, after all, they're mostly your people. Categorically untrue. Actually, we're the minority in Juneau, and we're the minority of the homeless. So, you know, it's those kind of unintended comments that continue to create that divide. And I'm very thankful to the CBJ and to Assemblyman Edwardson for putting that forward, because as I've heard most of you say, some of it's unintended and it's not even noticed. But I can tell you, as a white passing man of color, I noticed. When you're talking to me about my people, I notice, and it hurts. And I've been around long enough, over 25 years now in public service. I've gathered a pretty tough skin and realized that some of those things said aren't always how they're meant, or, you know, it comes from a place of ignorance or not knowing, but it's still there. And so sorry to kind of take over and say that, but I think it needed to be put into context. Juneau is evaluating options to address homelessness, including a location for an emergency shelter and solutions for youth homelessness. How do you feel about these options, and are there other solutions that should be considered? And I'll start with Christine.
I would guess that 9 out of 10 times that I ask Juneau citizens what they care about, this is their answer. And so I think to that point, it's surprising that our city hasn't invested more. I want to thank Tlingit Haida again for what they've been doing, in particular with addressing youth homelessness. And I'm hoping, if I'm elected, that I can partner, that the city can be partnering with Tlingit Haida on those efforts. I think there are some good models that Housing First comes to mind as an opportunity to provide permanent supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness. And then I think we talked a little bit about the Glory Hall move. I think that's going to be important. The community has wanted it for a long time, and it's going to be able to provide more services in one place than has existed previously. And so I'm glad that the city is choosing to invest in that endeavor as well.
Great. Robert?
Housing First has been shown to decrease the overall burden on the taxpayers in the area of law enforcement, social, and medical services, which is even more evident in Juneau as we own our own hospital. Giving people a warm, dry place to stay does a lot more than keep them alive. It gives them a sense of security. The Housing First model works because many of the needed services are under one roof. As to homelessness in our youth, this breaks my heart. I cannot imagine my son or daughter out there scared and alone. No child should have to worry about this in our country. I understand there is an effort to use the Cornerstone building. We must help our youth rise above this temporary problem so they can live their best life. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria?
Thanks for this. I agree. This is an issue that everybody wants to help with. There's short-term and long-term ways that, you know, short-term cold weather shelter. The Assembly recently decided not to use CARES Act funds to buy a building. I disagreed with that. I thought it would be a good use. We could use that building. That didn't happen, so we'll continue to have the cold weather shelter at the Jack. And COVID has again put a strain on all of these things. And another problem is day services and food. As everybody knows, there's some people experience homelessness who just tested positive for COVID. Just proves about they're having a difficulty time. They can't get into the glory hall. Folks can't get into the glory hall as many as. So people are wandering the streets, eating out of to-go containers. We really need to do something about that. The cold is coming, and so we're going to have yet another committee to work on it, and that's good. So those are the short-term things, sort of the immediate needs, and then long-term, the Glory Hall, is moving. I think that's a great thing. And United Human Services campus, they too need extra funds. Again, these are the most vulnerable people in our community. We need to figure out ways to help. So I support funding for those things as well. And we shouldn't focus on temporary shelters. We really need to focus on permanent supportive housing. Again, the city supported both phases of Housing First. 30 people got a home in the first phase, and another 30 plus will get a home in the second phase. People are moving in there now, so that will help some this winter. Not everyone's in there yet. They're moving them in more slowly. So that's helpful. Yeah, and things like the campground actually help, moving the campground closer to town. But again, those are temporary places. People can't live in a campground, and particularly people with more complex needs. People have been on the street, unfortunately, a long time, really need some permanent supportive housing, like Housing First. Another model is scattered site Housing First, finding homes for people not in one big building, but throughout the community. I'm super supportive of that, and hopefully we can do more of that soon.
Great. Lacey?
Thank you. You know, I really support the Glory Hall moving out to the Valley and being able to support all sides of the issues that really perpetuate being unsheltered and the homelessness. We need to be focusing on our mental health. We need to be focusing on our addiction recovery services. And by building the Glory Hall, we're able to put all those resources in one place and really focus from the short term out of the weather into long-term homed goals. And, you know, as we've seen, a lot of these issues tend to perpetuate generations. We need to start focusing for our youth. We need to start advocating for our youth. We need to start getting our youth into programs, assistance. We need to start supporting their parents who are desperately trying to seek options to help their children. When you're looking at a $13,000 a month price tag for a treatment facility within the state or out of state that doesn't accept insurance, what are you supposed to do? So we need to start focusing at a local level. We need to start breaking those cycles. These aren't just homeless citizens. These are our community, and we need to start treating them as our community members.
Derek?
Yeah, so I definitely want to echo a little bit of what Lacey said. I think that was very well said. I want to just highlight that homelessness is both a social issue and an economic one, and sometimes it starts early on with trauma that people experience as they go through the school district or as they grow up in homes with adverse conditions, and if they don't get the support that they need early on. So I think it's important to look at both the underlying issues and kind of zoom out a little bit, and also look at some of the on-the-ground issues, things like long-term supportive housing, centralization of resources. And then on the issue of the Glory Hall, I mean, it is a long and storied institution in our community, but unfortunately it can no longer serve the population it was designed to serve. It's too small for people to properly socially distance. It's not ADA compliant. And that's why I wholeheartedly support the move of the Glory Hall. It'll centralize more services. It'll provide for more space. It'll be ADA compliant. As we know, a lot of people experiencing homelessness have more complex needs and disabilities. And so Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, it definitely needs to be part of the services that are offered there. And so, yeah, right now, especially with crowds not here in town, with the lack of tourism traffic, I think it's an important moment for us as a community to really re-examine the issue and really take a look at how we want to holistically move forward on this. Thank you.
I was muted. Let me take your temperature here for a moment. We have one more framed question, and if you guys don't mind, we could finish that on that question. There's several other viewer questions, and I think our communication staff can send those to you. If you want to provide answers, we can post them, if that works for everybody. I think they're really great questions, and I think both those deserve to be heard and answered, but I think you deserve the opportunity to speak to those issues. So, all right, the last question is, The North Douglas expansion and connecting bridge have been highlighted in this election. How do you feel about it? And is CBJ on track with the community to present the information required for citizens to make a decision? I'll start with you, Garrett.
Thank you. So this question first came up in at a Chamber of Commerce forum, and I was surprised by how many members and my fellow candidates just immediately supported it. I do think that it's a long-term necessity for Juneau. If this town continues to develop, the people are continuing to develop land on the backside of Douglas. Already people face long waits for emergency services because you have to essentially drive all the way around to get out there. So I think that it's an important long-term goal. I would be surprised to see this community wage forward on such a project in the middle of the immediate COVID-related crises. But then on the other hand, it is important to invest in infrastructure to move your way through economic instability. So I do tentatively support it, but as to the amount of information that's disseminated to the community, I would like to see an improvement on that. I know that the state completed a study regarding it, but I have not heard that information widely circulated in the community. So I think it's time for the CBJ to be a little bit more transparent with the community. And it's also time for us as Juneauites to engage more in that process, look up information, educate ourselves about it, and see if the current proposal, which goes from North Douglas to Mendenhall Peninsula, tentatively, if that's something that we support.
Great. Christine.
What I've heard from the community, at least the folks that I've talked to, is that people are interested in, eventual development on the backside of Douglas. And I think, if we are going to have that, we are going to need a second crossing. However, to Derek's points, the community really needs to be involved in that discussion and that decision making. I know there is a study being conducted right now, or just about to begin, on what the impacts of that second crossing would be. And so I think that is a good step to having that conversation with the community. In particular, where it's sited is going to be really important. We know that our wetlands and waterways are really sensitive, and we know that this project could impact those depending on where it goes. And so, I'm looking forward to what that study says and what the community has for feedback.
Great. Maria?
Sure. Briefly, I would say I support the North Douglas crossing, and no, I don't think that the communication has been enough or been adequate for citizens to make decisions. When we were talking about bond issues, one of the possible projects on the current bonds was to complete more of the Pioneer Road. And I thought that that should not be on the table because I don't think the community is on board completely with understanding the whole deal. The last time the community was asked the question about the North Douglas crossing, I don't even know how many years ago now, but some number of years ago, they voted no, and I wasn't involved in any of that campaign or anything. In fact, I was out of town for most of it. But what I heard of the messaging was just not adequate. I mean, they talked about public safety and emergency services, and while that's true, for me, the real underlying reasons to do this project is because we need access to developable land on the backside of Douglas. It's development right now is very expensive because what's left on the road system is wetlands, hard to develop land, has steep slopes, all of that. So we have inadequate housing, we have inadequate land for commercial use, we have inadequate land for industrial use. All of that makes goods and services more expensive in this community. If you are a young person trying to make a brewery right now, like Marcy and Jeff did 35 years ago, or 1986, however many years ago that is, there is not land for you to do that. So you might be super passionate about this community, but if you want to start a brewery, you'd be hard pressed to find a spot to put it. So for the long-term development of this community, it's really important to develop those land, and you can't develop the land on the backside of Douglas without a second bridge. The traffic on the first bridge fails when you do traffic studies to permit your project. you can't fail traffic, and the traffic on the current bridge fails if there's any kind of significant development there. So that's the real reason to me for the North Douglas crossing. It is going to be a long-term project. It's not going to be anytime soon, certainly not going to be during, you know, pandemic times. It's why that the Pioneer Road got built, to begin to work our way through that. So I support it, and I don't think the communication's been adequate, but we do need flat, easily developable dry land if our community will continue to be vital in the future.
Great, thank you. Robert?
There's a lot of land that could be available if we get that road built. The city's been talking about that road for 20 years. We've had a lot of opportunities. I'm still learning about the comprehensive plan itself. I look forward to further discussion as our community makes these important decisions. Although if we do wait long enough, I think the glacier will build that road for us. But as to right now during the pandemic, well, I mean, it could be a good project if we could get the funding in order to put a lot of people to work. Creating the road itself and opening up spaces to build houses or other operations, it could really help the community out a lot. I just don't know how fast anyone really wants to move forward on the project at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Lacey?
You know, I do support the crossing at some point, but I have to echo the sentiments of my fellow candidates. I do think it is going to be a long-term project. I'm really interested in hearing the most recent study that is being developed. I've had a lot of communication from citizens asking, well, have I read about the waterway impacts, the impacts to vessels? And that's exactly what we're looking for. We're trying to find the most optimal spot for this to go, because as we've seen, our environment is very unique. We need to be able to put the crossing not only to where we are making it safe, but we are putting it in an area to where we can maintain it. We've been talking a lot about maintenance. Putting it in the wrong place could be absolutely detrimental to the project and cost more money in the end. But one thing Maria said, I mean, it is access to development. And that is one thing that we need. We're talking about wanting to have more area for housing and to develop housing projects. This is exactly the way that we're going to do it, but we need to do it in the best way possible. And we do need to get that information out there better.
Great. Well, thank you. And that concludes our questions. Again, we have some viewer questions. Our staff will get those to you so you can provide answers, and we'll post those. Just really want to thank all of you. Each of you did an outstanding job. And again, thank you so much for putting yourselves forward. It takes a lot of effort, energy to want to serve your community, to balance your personal and family life with that. And so I just, again, want to congratulate you and thank you for taking this opportunity to serve your community. And thank you for agreeing to join us today for our lunchtime chat. Have been getting a lot of feedback. My texts have been going off, and so people are paying attention, and I think that's really great. We want to get people engaged and get out the vote. So, and to that end, I just want to talk about getting out the vote. We have some very important election dates to remind you of. October 4th is voter registration deadline for the general election. October 19th is absentee in person, early voting, electronic transmission, and special needs voting begins. October 6th, the Juneau Municipal Election Day. November 2nd, deadline to receive absentee by electronic transmission ballot applications. November 3rd, General Election Day. So we also want to encourage you to apply to vote absentee. Anyone can request an absentee ballot. Voting absentee is a safe and secure way to make our voices heard in the primary and general elections. Voting absentee is quick, easy, and secure. You can apply for an absentee by going to absenteeballotatapplication.alaska.gov or by calling 907-270-2700. And again, remind everybody about the census right now. It is critical that we make sure that every household in Alaska is counted. Alaska currently has one of the lowest census response rates in the country, and there are millions of dollars at stake for our communities that fund schools, public safety, hospitals, and housing. The deadline is September 30th, and our villages, communities, region, and state are counting on you to make sure that you fill out the census. And this is everybody. This isn't native, non-native. This isn't rural, urban. This affects everybody. And you know, I've been lucky to be a part of some efforts on this. And you know what? For 10 minutes to fill out that survey, it'll pay out. You will earn our communities $36,000 over the next 10 years for 10 minutes. I mean, I think that's a pretty great rate of return. Wish I had those odds going to Vegas. I'd be there. Anyhow, just want to and remind folks, First Alaskans is partnered with Alaska Federation Natives and Tlingit Haida. If you filled out the survey or the census, you can then enter in for a survey to win some pretty amazing prizes. They're giving cash, $3,500. They're giving a four-wheeler, a skiff, a snow machine. I mean, they're definitely talking to my ear. I want one. I want a new four-wheeler. So anyways, please fill those out, and we really greatly appreciate that. This week's winners for our door prize today are Marlene Nielsen won the Hydro Flask, and Sarah Escobar won the David Boxley t-shirt. So anyways, if you send private message us your addresses, we'll get those in the mail to you right away. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. I want to thank our sponsors who help us on the Get Out the Native Vote, and that's Sea Alaska, Tlingit Haida Regional Housing Authority, and Gold Belt. Gonna shout out to everybody. Everybody be well. You know, our numbers are still not in the area we want them, so wear your mask, physical distance, and do your part to flatten the curve. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you.